Hey everybody, great to have you back here in the fish tank. It's Minion Masters patch notes. We're going to go through all the stuff for the new patch, which is dropping tomorrow. If you're watching us live on YouTube, it is dropping tomorrow. So, just a reminder, we are within the Minion Masters power-up expansion. These expansions for Minion Masters last for 3 months, and they are separated into 3 monthly seasons. This is going to be the second monthly season within the power-up expansion. Right, so this one is going to be called Shift in SANDS. It's going to be version 2.7 and it's going to be dropping Tuesday the 27th of August. So Tuesday, not Thursday. And I think going forward we're going to see patches on a Tuesday instead of a Thursday, which is good because if should there be the need for hotfixes, this gives the devs more time before the weekend to do the hotfixes. And the reason the hotfixes over the weekend are problematic is specifically because of Xbox and Microsoft. They don't do any certification over the weekend. Right, so Tuesday, if you're watching this live on YouTube for our premiere, this should be dropping tomorrow. So we're going to have, as always, a new season pass, 2 new cards, new cosmetics, balance changes, bug fixes, and of course, a new tournament. So the first thing we're going to do is meet the new cards. Right, so the first new card is called Ankahesh. Desert's Doom. And as you can see, this is kind of a spider, but it's not technically a spider because it only has 6 legs. But if you're arachnophobe, you may hate it. I don't know. Let me know. Let's find out about this chap or chapess. So this is going to be a slither-based expansion, and it's going to be all around kind of the poison mechanic. And we'll see that reflected in the new cards and some of the balance changes that we'll cover in a little bit. So 7 mana minion. This is a melee minion, only attacks ground, so it attacks for 40, does, what's that, 22 DPS, has 700 health. So, you know, not too bad tanky-wise. The DPS doesn't look good, but don't worry, we have a special Mother's Gift. But before we get that, let's just remind you, this has the sacrifice mechanic, so that means when you spawn it, it sacrifices, in this case, all of your Slitherbound, so the little Slither dudes. And this will cause each of your Slitherbounds to burst into 3 Spiderlings. And if you're wondering what a Spiderling is, we'll cover that shortly. Okay, so when you spawn her, I guess it's a her because it's Mother's Gift, right? When you spawn her, she sacrifices all of your Slitherbounds. You get a bunch of Spiderlings, but she also has a special keyword, which is Mother's Gift. Now, the way this works is when she attacks, she also inflicts 4 seconds of poison. So she does her 40 damage plus 4 seconds of poison. Remember, poison is 20 DPS. So that's 40, that's 4 seconds of 20, so that's 80 damage. Maths, quick maths. 80 poison damage applied. Remember the way poison damage works is it's applied and then it slowly ticks. So, base attack, little bit of damage, plus the poison damage, but she also does extra damage based on the amount of poison applied to her target. So she's only single target. So here you can see attack deals bonus damage equal to the remaining poison damage. So if something has 40 poison damage when she attacks it, 40 poison applied to it, she'll do an extra 40 damage. So basically the way she works, if you look at her just in a vacuum on her own with no other minions, so she'll attack, apply the poison, then she'll attack again and do extra damage based on the poison and apply more poison. The next time she attacks, and so basically each time she attacks she does more and more damage because of the more and more poison being stacked on it. And of course you do have the alternative to apply poison in other ways, and we'll see the Spiderlings in a minute. So the more poison you can put on her target, the more damage she does. But that's not the last part of the Mother's Gift. The last part is when her target dies, she will, or a Spiderling will be spawned, plus an additional Spiderling for every 100 poison damage taken. So that's not applied, that's taken. So actually damage taken by the minion. So she can DPS down big units and then spawn a bunch of little Spiderlings. There is a guaranteed Spiderling per target killed, so if she's still just killing scrats or whatever, you do get a Spiderling for each one. So could be interesting. She's going to be really good at killing big units. Too good? Who knows? But we'll find out. So that's the first one. She's a legendary. And the second one, as we alluded to, the Spiderlings. So, Spiderlings, 3 mana Slither minion. You get 6 of them. They're tiny. You get 6 of them. They are melee. They're very weak. You can see they only have 10 HP. And they do 2 damage. So very, very weak stats. But they inflict poison per attack. So 1.1 seconds of poison per attack. So remember, they're attacking, what did we say, every 1.2 seconds. And then there's 6 of them as well. So really the idea of these guys is to stack a lot of poison. And then you have various different things within the game that synergize with the poison. We just saw the other new card, the Ankaresh. You've also got like a Kinlept's Gong of Pestilence, for example. That will also synergize. So these guys really are very weak. You can take bridges with them, of course, but their whole thing is about inflicting poison. Okay, as always, let me know in the comments what do you think of the new cards and stuff as we go through. And of course, if you're new here to the Fish Tank and the Minion Masters and you're enjoying the content, make sure you give us a thumbs up. Also hit that subscribe button so you stay up to date with everything Minion Masters related. Right, so moving on to the new cosmetics, which will be in the Battle Pass. So remember the way the Minion Masters Battle Passes work is you have the free tier, but you have the premium tier. The new cosmetics are always in the free tier. The new cards are in both tiers, so even if you're a completely free-to-play player, you can still get the new cards. It just takes you a little bit longer to get through the Season Pass. Right, so Slither-based expansion means we're going to see a new skin for Apep. Nagaraja. So, I'm familiar with Nagas in the context of World of Warcraft. I'm sure that's not where they originate from. I'm sure there's some lore behind that. But here we see, this is actually an awesome looking skin. And we've had some really good skins lately in Minion Masters. We've had the Witch Doctor, most recently I think for Diona. We've had the Gunslinger for Rekt. We've had that Mordor skin. Loads of recent skins have actually been great. I don't think we've had a recolor for a good while. Right, so there's a new Apep skin. And then as always we have the new avatars for the new cards. Ankaresh, the Desert's Doom, sorry, and the Spiderlings avatar. And a new emote, which is Apep. So if Apep needed any more reason to be played, we're going to see a new skin and a new emote. Now, if you watch my meta video, you will have seen that the play rate for Apep actually did drop off, and that's primarily because of some strong alternate master perks, which were introduced in the last patch. And we'll have a look next at the balance changes, which include quite a few changes to the alternate master perks. Okay, so balance changes where we're going to be looking at things getting buffed, stronger, nerfed, weaker, or rebalanced, which means they're changed in different ways, which could be a buff, could be a nerf, depending on the situation, or just changed completely. Right, so let's go through them. The first thing we're going to look at is King Puff. So this is King Puff's alternative perk 2, Mimic Magic. That's where your unbuffed minions copy a buff from a buffed minion. Now, previously you could only do that every second. Now you can do that every 0.5 seconds. So if you're using this to copy buffs, Spirit, Giant Growth, maybe. I'm not sure what the exact list includes, and I haven't really tried this, to be honest. Rage, of course. So you should be able to get those buffs a lot quicker if you've got a lot of different minions. So that could be an improvement there. Of course, we've had some alt perks that have been really dominant, some that haven't seen much play, and I think this is one that hasn't seen too much play. Right, next up we see a buff to Mordor. So Mordar's alt perk 1, the Tomb of the Deathless. That's where you res your opponent's minions instead of yours. So the duration of the tomb is going up from 30 seconds to 35 seconds. And also there's kind of been a fix buff where the perk 2, which is where the things that get revived have Spirit and Haste, that was completely broken with the alt perk. So you didn't get them at all. So now you do. And also the Spirit, which is basically means the extra health of the units, doesn't count towards the tombstone damage. So remember, when something revives, it does a certain amount of damage to the tombstone. If the tombstone survives, then it will charge up, and or actually, in this case with the alt perk, it doesn't even need to charge. It will just revive more until it dies. Okay, so that should definitely be a Mordar buff if you're using the alt perk. Right, next up we see a buff to Morelia's alt perk 1, Rites of the Dead. So that's, instead of her normal spellbook, this is her where she gets one random page of the spellbook, but you get it now every 15 seconds instead of 18 seconds. So, haven't really seen too much of this. I think there's a little bit too much RNG. One of the powers of Morelia and her spellbook is the 4 different options, the flexibility it gives you. And of course this completely removes that flexibility. So I think it definitely needs something. Is the cooldown going to be low enough to make people use it? I don't know. We'll find out. Right, next up we have Setsu. Now remember in the last patch, if you've been following along with the changes, Setsu got changed quite a lot. And her play rate went down even further. Not that she was a very highly played master, but in certain situations where she could stun lock, it was very anti-fun. So the change to her was to remove that, but she needs something else to replace it. So remember her basic perk 3, now it doesn't stun every time you reload, it stuns every 5th shot. So no more stun locking. So her basic buff, her basic attack is the cooldown's going down to 0.9 seconds. So that means, one, her DPS is going to go up a little bit, but also it means she's going to get through to that 5th shot more quickly, so she'll stun more often. So that looks like a small buff, but it's actually bigger than I think it looks like. And also her alternative perk 3, the air support, where you call in the Hellfire, that's going to be spread across 4 instead of 2, so you could get more value, hopefully, from that. Right, next up we see a buff to Tronvir's alternate master perk, Runic Attunement. So that's the one where you spend mana on either spells, on buildings, or minions, and you get a certain rune depending on it. So this one is the Frost rune, where you have to spend mana on minions, and the mana requirement is going down from 25 to 20. Again, this is probably one of the worst alt perks, just from sort of value. I wouldn't be surprised if we see some further buffs to this at some point. Right, so those are the masters for the buffs. Let's have a look at some cards now. So Ghost. Ghost is one of those cards that can be either incredible or just dead, depending on what your opponent's playing. It's been adjusted slightly to how it affects mythic minions. So remember, against mythic minions, it doesn't possess them. But what it will do now is it won't give them the spirit, where previously it would, which was kind of like you're kind of almost buffing your opponent's units. And the stun is going from 10 seconds up to 12 seconds. So no spirit or curse for the possession of a mythic, but they do get stunned for longer. So, I mean, a 12-second stun for 4 mana, it's not terrible, to be honest, as long as you've got the DPS to really make use of it. Right. One of the newer cards, Kamikaze Zeppelin, that we didn't see very often at all, getting an explosion damage going up from 150 to 200. Remember, it flies in, dropping bombs, and if it gets to its target, because it is targetable as it comes through, when it gets to its target, it explodes, and now does 200 damage, 100 to face. But going up from 150 to 200, that's quite a lot of thresholds that it kind of health thresholds that it breaks, and it can kill a lot more now. So if we just very quickly go through what it can kill: Spirit Mancer, Blast Mancer, Leylail, Veilstalker, Boombuggy, Musketeer, Stormtaber, Succubus. I'm not sure if it hits air or not. Let me know in the comments or in the YouTube chat if we're doing this live. Let me know if the Kamikaze Zeppelin hits air. I'm unsure. Haven't really used it that much. Right, next up we have Kurnath Crystalback. Little HP buff going up to 325 from 300. This is the chap that triggers when a spell is used by either player and deals damage to the 3 closest things. So he's getting a little more tanky. Was proposed in the PTR to go up to 350, but the feedback from the players was that's going to be too much. So 325. Magma Cannon really overshone recently with the Crossbow Clubhouse, and we'll see how that's getting addressed in a little bit. But the attack cooldown is going down, so it'll attack more quickly. Its DPS will be higher. So just a little buff there for the Magma Cannon. Nazara the Cold Countess, her damage just flat going up from 70 to 80. She attacks every second, so 70 up to 80 DPS. Solid DPS. Remember, she has her Frost Nova ability, she has her healing vampiric ability, and she has Icebreaker to do maximum damage through frozen targets. So we'll see how she does. I just haven't seen too much of her in a situation where she's done very well. Right, next up we have the Spire Stag. Attack cooldown going down to 1.3 seconds from 1.5, so just a stat boost, DPS going up, attacks more quickly, better against Horde, etc, etc. And of course it does the charge. But one of the big issues with the Spire Stag is if it's charging, it just charges over the bridge. It's too fast, like Fanriel is, to capture the bridge, which is kind of like a kind of an awkward thing. But is it part of the card's balance? I guess so. Right, so those are the buffs, the cards and the master perks. They're getting stronger. Let's have a look at some rebalances. So this is alternate master perk for Stormbringer, perk 2, Cloud Cover. Now, mana cost going down from 1 to 0. Duration going down from 10 seconds to 5 seconds, but the first attack whilst you're in the air is empowered, which means it does an extra 50 damage. So remember, the Cloud Cover is where you can lift a ground minion up, and if it's ranged, it gets marksmanship, and it does an empowered attack now. This is a difficult one because the basic Stormbringer attack, the perk 2, the marksmanship to all your ranged units, is kind of so integral to the Stormbringer mindset and so strong. It's kind of difficult. It almost feels like that perk needs a nerf to make any other alt perks sort of at all viable. Right, Taluk the Vessel. This is another chap that will synergize well with Poison, but not quite so well. So his base damage is going up from 60 to 70, but his bonus damage against minions that are poisoned or stunned, stunned is kind of weird, I don't even know why that's in there, but stunned or poisoned, previously he would do double damage, now he'll only do 50% extra damage. So unactivated, actually better than before. Activated, not as good as before, but not terrible. So his base DPS is going up from 33 to 38, and his activated DPS against stunned or poison targets is going down from 66 to 58. So still very, very powerful, and I would still think we'll see a lot of Taluk being played out there. Right, another rebalance here to the War Dancers. So damage going down from 25 to 20, but attack cooldown going down, which is a good thing. So they do less damage, but they attack more quickly. So their DPS is going down from 25 to 22.2, which doesn't sound much, but that 25 down to 20 damage, again, that's quite some thresholds that are going to be crossed. So you can no longer single shot a crossbow dude, and you can no longer kill a little skeleton in 2 hits. So there's certain situations where these minions are going to trade a lot worse. And that's just an example of a small nerf crossing these thresholds actually being quite substantial. Okay. Nerfs. Things that were too strong, getting weaker. So Diona's alternative perk 2, which is the Black Potion, which means you get the Werewolf instead of the health, mana, or XP. The cooldown on that is going up from 22 seconds to 25 seconds. Remember, the 25-second cooldown only starts when the wolf dies, so there is quite a substantial time between wolves. But I do think that's quite a strong perk. Probably needs that little nerf. Right, King Puff. Perk 3, this is the basic King Puff perk 3, Send Forth the Horde. That's when you do a bridge switch and you generate Night Puffs. So previously you could generate up to 5 Night Puffs, now it's going to be up to 4. So I think that's quite a substantial nerf, because when we're talking about doing the bridge switch and the Night Puffs, you're not thinking about how much damage a Night Puff on its own does, you're thinking about how much the 5 together do, because they kind of all attack at once, so it's like one big attack. So instead of them switching and doing 200 damage immediately, they'll only do 160 damage immediately. So that'll be a bunch of things they won't kill immediately. But of course they do have a little bit of A little bit of leeway, because with the bridge switch you do have that 4-second stun. But I do think this is quite a substantial nerf, because they're not going to instantly kill things, and then that's going to give your opponent time to react with a spell or something to potentially save them. So I do think that's quite a substantial nerf there for King Puff. Right, now this is a nerf to Ratbo's alternate master perk 2, Squeak Attack, which is where you get the burrowed scrats. Their damage when they come out, their first attack, is going to be down to 10 extra damage instead of 15. This was one of the strongest alternate perks, especially in 2v2s. And again, from my meta video, this really showed a huge increase in Ratbo's play rate compared to previous seasons. Right, next up we have a nerf to Bearvalanche, which is a very heavily played spell. And I do wonder if this might be a nerf too far, because a couple of things. So it's no longer going to inflict slow. So slow does two things. It reduces the movement speed, and it reduces the minion speed, and their attack speed, their attack cooldown increases that. So that they move slower and they attack slower. So it's kind of a double whammy that's slow. And the thing about Bearvalanche is the slow it inflicts is permanent, or at least it was. So no slow, and the move speed, while affected, instead of the move speed being -2, it's now -3. So that's kind of to make up for the lost slow. So basically the Bearvalanche will do the damage like it used to. It will slow things movement-wise like it used to, but it will not slow them with their attack in any way. And there'll be no permanent slows. So for example, Shen's Stormstrike, he gets absolutely neutered by a slow. So that's going to be a huge, if you're playing Shen, that's going to be a huge buff for him. To me, that feels like maybe too much of a nerf from how it was before. I would prefer if it did the slow whilst minions were in it, but it's not a permanent slow. But anyway, we'll see how that goes. Next up, we have another card that was played very heavily last season, especially in solos, the Crossbow Clubhouse. Did get quite a few buffs recently. I think in my last video I did say maybe this is a buff too far, and guess what? It was. So a couple of things. The attack cooldown going up to 0.6 seconds from 0.5, so DPS slower, lower, does less overall damage, worse against Horde, etc. But also one of the things that made it really oppressive is that it was missing the placement aura. So the building placement aura means it's got this sort of area around it where you can't place it straight up to a bridge or up to the edge of anything, of the arena. But this, for some reason, was missing it. So it meant you could really place it aggressively on bridges. It could cover a lot more of the bridges further into your opponent's arena than it really was designed to be able to. So that's now been fixed. So that should also be a nerf to it. Right, and then we see a nerf to the Slitherbound. They did get nerfed previously, but again, you know, this season, I think with that in mind, it's a poison season, Slither season. These guys are getting another nerf, so their poison per attack is going down from 2 seconds to 1.5 seconds, so that's 40 poison damage down to 30 poison damage, which I think is probably fair. That's a cheap card that we see in a lot of decks, even in decks that don't really use any sort of poison synergy. Okay, and another poison-based nerf is going to be the Wogosaur Pup. So he spits poison on play, which is 50 damage plus 5 seconds of poison. That's been reduced to 3 seconds of poison. So instead of 100 poison damage plus the 50, it's going to be 60 poison damage plus the 50. So definitely going to trade less well. And Zealots of the Burning Fist, a card that we've seen hugely, especially in solos last season. So, when one of them dies, the remaining one, the survivor, will heal for 140 instead of receiving the spirit. Now, the HP a Zealot would gain for receiving the spirit is 140. So there's some situations where it doesn't actually change at all. So if the survivor has a 210 HP or less, it will get healed for 140 instead of receiving the spirit for 140. So it's the same thing. But if it's got more, the survivor, more than the 210 HP, then it gets less of a reward from this, because of course you can only heal a minion up to its maximum health. So if you kill one of these whilst the survivor is full HP, it doesn't heal for anything because it's got no damaged health. So in some situations this is going to be a nerf, in other situations it's not really going to change too much. But definitely an improvement. You're not going to have that awkward situation where you kill one and then you've got a massively tanky one left over. Okay, so those are the balance changes. Let's have a look at the fixes and improvements. So we've spoken about some of these as we go through. So the crossbow clubhouse missing the placement aura, that's now been resolved. There was a bug with Morelia's standard spellbook, not correctly discounting spells if they were in your hand. That's been fixed. There was an issue with the Mountain Shaper UI being reversed, so that's been fixed. Not necessarily a buff to the card, but it definitely makes it easier to use and maybe makes people more likely to use it. Fixed the incorrect Nether Step Swarmer placement. I feel like they were spawning in the wrong arena or something. And as we spoke before, fixed Mordar's perk 2 not working with the alternate perk 1. Right, so some improvements there. Next up, we're going to have a look at this month's tournament. Well, this month being September. So I think it's going to be on the 14th of September. Check the link in the description to keep up to date with all of the details. So this is, of course, a 1v1 tournament. We've got a $400 prize pool. This should be the first tournament where alternate master perks are allowed. We didn't have them in the last one because there were a couple of issues. There were some bugs with some of them. But also there were some issues with the UI, specifically the streamer UI, which I wasn't comfortable with. But that has now been fixed, actually. That was fixed in the last hot fix. There was an issue with the streamer UI, perk 2, not being changed. Now it can. Right. And a reminder that the tournaments are cross-platform, so you can join whether you're mobile, PC, or Xbox. And there's prizes for everyone that gets involved. It's a lot of fun. They're open to everyone of any ability. So it would be great to have you there. Join the tournament, support the tournament scene, get involved, and if you don't want to play, just come and hang out in the tournament stream. It would be great to see you there. Right, let's just remind ourselves. So Shifting Sands version 2.7 is dropping Tuesday the 27th of August. We got the new season pass, the new cards, Ankaresh and the Spiderlings. We got the new cosmetics, including that awesome new Apep skin. We got a bunch of balance changes, bug fixes, and a new tournament. That's it, guys. We got through it. A lot of stuff to cover, a lot of stuff to look forward to in the next season. Now, as I mentioned earlier, if you're enjoying the content here in the Fish Tank, please do take a second. It does really make a world of difference. Give us a thumbs up and hit the subscribe button if you want to keep up to date on everything Minion Masters related. Hit me up in the comments. Let me know, what do you think of these two new cards? What do you think of the new skin? And of course the balance changes. But I will look forward to seeing you tomorrow, if you're watching this live, on our Twitch stream when we go through all the new stuff when it's live. I've been Bad as a Fish, and you have been awesome.